And joining us now on the panel to talk about this and a whole lot of other things going on this, actually it's turned out to be a beautiful day here in New York. When I got to work this morning, it was a little bit dreary, so I just looked out the windows and it looks like the sun is shining. Joining me here on set is Jim Pinkerton. He's an FNC contributor, and you can find him at James Pinkerton on Twitter, correct?
Right,
I
think James P, I think, yes.
Yeah.
I think we're...
And then also joining us in D.C. is Christy Setzer. She's a Democratic strategist and president of New Heights Communications. Thanks for joining us, Christy.
Thanks for having me, Heather.
Jim, I'll start with you. The campaign trail heating up. We have both Bachmann and Perry in South Carolina. And how do you think Perry's going to play out? I mean, this is real, still new, a new announcement by all accounts that he's running.
Right. I should tell you that my wife works for Michelle Bachmann on her campaign. So, but having said that, I think
full disclosure.
Full disclosure. Look, they're both attractive candidates, and they've got a lot to say, and they've got different messages. It was interesting, the point that Carl made, they're sort of ignoring each other at this point, not in a bad way, but just sort of choosing to do their own thing. They both have to introduce themselves. And I think that the challenge will be for anybody else, including Romney, including all the other candidates. Carl mentioned Rick Santorum and Ron Paul. There's a lot of candidates in the mix, and two of them, and plus Romney, seem to be getting most of the attention right now.
And what do you think, Christy? Is that a wise move for them to sort of be ignoring each other right now, specifically talking about Bachmann and Perry in South Carolina?
It is for the time being. At some point, they're going to have to engage with one another, seeing as how they are actually going for the same votes. But I want to go back. It's been a terrible week, I have to say, for Rick Perry. Someone, as Carl was saying, it seems as though he could end up being a disaster of a candidate, whether it's the remarks that he made about Ben Bernanke, where he actually even got a lot of Republican criticism for his sort of tough cowboy talk, or now whether it's the idea that his big claim on the jobs numbers are maybe not as all that they were cut out to be. That some of these numbers are somewhat exaggerated. A lot of minimum wage jobs. There's still high unemployment in Texas, that sort of thing. So, it remains to be seen how Rick Perry is going to end up being as a candidate. But in his initial first steps, it looks a little shaky.
Well, let's jump ahead to that and let's talk a little bit more about Perry's job record in Texas, because that has been scrutinized very closely this past week, and there has been, I don't know if you can call it a discrepancy in the numbers.
I don't think there's been a discrepancy. I think the numbers seem to suggest that about 40% of all the jobs in the country were made in Texas.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody doubts that Texas has a pro-business, pro-growth economic environment.
Yeah, 48% of jobs added. So that's like what, between June 2009, April 2011, 237,000 jobs. 48% of the 496,000 jobs added nationally.
Right.
So, I mean,
that's a good record.
Awesome.
That is awesome. And again, I think that critics are free to analyze those numbers any way they want. And I don't think they'll find much room to attack Perry in terms of, well, how many corporate headquarters have moved to Dallas and Houston? The answer is a lot. I mean, how many companies have relocated there? How does the Cato Institute, how do places like that rate the Texas business climate? That was just one little thing that Perry did, that also former Governor Bush did, tort reform. Tort reform is a major issue for any business thinking about things, and Texas has been a leader on that, unambiguously. And I think that the more scrutiny Perry gets on that, he'll do fine. Yeah.
So what do you think, Christy? I mean, he says for the state of Texas, we want your business, and he goes out there and he solicits these companies to come to Texas. What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion is that there actually is a lot to look into in these jobs numbers, and unlike Jim, I do think that there is much to criticize. I mean, what we know is that of those numbers that he's touting, some of those jobs came from the Recovery Act that President Obama, of course, championed. Some of those jobs are the result of the fact that we have high gas prices. These are oil company jobs. And some of those jobs are military jobs that are the result of our country being at war. And then when you dig down a little deeper, you'll find that a lot of the jobs that have been created are in fact these minimum wage, low wage jobs that don't support a family. I heard there was this joke going around in Texas, which is, yeah, sure, Governor Perry's created lots of jobs. I've got 3 of them, which speaks to the idea that these aren't the sort of family sustaining jobs that you would actually want.
I would be very interested, anyone that's out there right now and who is online, if you are in Texas, join our chat and let us know what you think firsthand, your firsthand experience there in Texas. I'd be very interested to see if we get anything. But we did have someone, Jim, that agreed with you in terms of tort reform, a huge issue, the person says. And let's see, it's Mike Carter, and he says, Jim's so right, tort reform is a huge issue, a big money battle to come on that at the federal level.
He's absolutely right. It is a huge, any business person will tell you, look, I live in fear more than anything of that registered letter coming from some trial lawyer over something like that. And it would appear that the Obama administration has looked the other way on all this, which helps explain why they spent trillions of dollars on stimulus money and so on, and unemployment's risen. You may remember back in January of 2009, Christina Romer, who was President Obama's then economic advisor, said that if we pass a stimulus package, unemployment will never go above 8%. Well, it was 7.8 when she said that. It went above 8 and it has stayed there for 33 months. It is the longest period of unemployment being above 8% since the 1930s, since the Depression. And so whatever criticism Perry can get on his job record, I would think that President Obama has about a trillion times the exposure on his job record.
And Christy, speaking of that, and President Obama, on the heels of these just desolate employment numbers, the news coming out of the S&P and the drop to our credit rating and everything else going on, do you think that it was a wise move for the president to, head off to Martha's Vineyard?
Look, these are expected criticisms, but I don't think anyone begrudges the president for taking a few days on vacation to spend with his wife and his kids right before they go back to school. I mean, he's obviously not just the president, he's also a husband and a father, and and I think that obviously if this were the kind of thing where he takes a lot of vacation, or it's ends up being comparatively a problem with other presidents, then that's right for criticism. But the fact is, at this point in his presidency, George Bush had already taken 3 times as many days on vacation as President Obama already has. So I think that the criticism is expected from certain quarters, but I don't actually think that it's terribly appropriate.
I confess I don't get too worked up over his vacations either. It seems to me what he does in Washington is more damaging than eating ice cream cones with his daughter on Martha's Vineyard. Although I think Bill Clinton, the better metric is Bill Clinton, the last Democratic president, who was taking a lot less vacations, and Dick Morris had Clinton going off to Yellowstone Park and Missouri paddle wheel boats and things like that, trying to, and effectively so, connecting Bill Clinton to ordinary middle America, which President Obama seems to have a poor feel for.
Yeah, I will say that, and Christy, I want your comment on this as well, because a lot of Democratic leaders are coming out and saying, and a lot of what may be termed, liberal, pollsters or
the
talking heads are coming out against President Obama. They previously supported him, and they're saying this exact thing, that he cannot relate to the common man, so to speak, the guy that's out there, like you were just speaking to, that has the minimum wage job, that's trying to support a family, that's part of President Obama's problem.
I would say that's not the problem so much as the fact that he has given in, I think, on a lot of different issues, including the recent debt deal and the default crisis, to an almost entirely Republican plan and Republican almost framing of the issues, that I think he ends up losing his something that he has is being seen as a fighter for for the middle class. So I think that
he's not a fighter, and he's maybe leaning more towards trying to get those independent voters.
So I think that he's having a problem right now, I think, with maybe he's not having a problem, but I think that there are some quarters of the Democratic Party who have gotten upset with the president over being willing to compromise even on cherished programs such as Social Security and Medicare, with the Republican Party. Now, look, I think that speaks to the fact that he was certainly last month willing to get a debt deal done, at any cost, even at, the price of sort of his own reputation in a way. I think he definitely did not want to allow our economy to go into crisis and was willing to bend over backwards to compromise on those issues. But I think it did cost him some points with, with more liberal Democrats and with some progressives.
Christy, I have a question for you from one of our viewers that's joined us in the chat room. This is from Sassy Sue, and Sassy Sue would like to know, and you can expect from her name that this is a little bit sassy.
A sassy question?
Yes. What exactly have the Democrats done in 2.5 years? They couldn't even pass a budget.
Okay, all right, well, that is a sassy question.
Yes.
I'll give you that. Sure. I mean, I think, look, there's a lot of accomplishments that the president can point to, including, historic health care reform that President Obama was able to get done that, many other presidents were not, including stopping the bleeding on, with the stimulus bill, including turning around the auto industry, including killing Osama bin Laden. I mean, this man actually has a lot of accomplishments that he can point to. And, while we're sitting here talking about which segments of the voting electorate are getting upset with him right now. The fact is that he does still have not only a list of accomplishments to point to, but also people still like him. I mean, if you look at polling, it's true that his job approval is lower than it's been in the past, but his favorability ratings remain high, and what that means is that Americans still really want him to succeed. They still, they're still really fighting for President Obama.
Okay, and Jim, I'll give you the final word on this.
I think people want their president to succeed. I mean, the stakes are too high to have a president fail. I think, however, they reached a judgment that this president is sort of over his head, that he's not a fighter, and it's not so much that he's fighting for the middle class. He obviously won't fight for the left on core issues then, but he also can't come to grips with the fact the country is way to the right of where he is, and so what the country does want is less government and lower spending, and the professional left, what they're now calling the firebaggers, which is sort of a play on teabaggers and Fire Dog Lake.
I had not heard that. How have I not heard
firebaggers,
that?
yeah. I'm sure Christy knows. They're furious. I'll tell you who Obama reminds me of is Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was sort of torn between the far left and tried to be in the middle and couldn't really decide either, and was left being seen as ineffectual, and of course was left as the one-term president.
Yeah, down in Plains, Georgia, right? Yeah. All right, panel, don't go far because we will join you again in a moment, but right now we're going to go to Amy Kellogg.